Hey everybody, welcome back to another edition of Ikigai Leadership. I am here with a really exciting guest, Mr. James Chan. Dr. James Chan. James, thanks so much for joining us today. James is the founder and principal of the Asia Marketing and Management Company. James, you have a really interesting story and a really fascinating background, and I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today.
Well, thank you, Drew. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to tell my stories. I think that it would intrigue a few people.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're also an author of Spare Room Tycoon, and I love that title because it really encapsulates the entrepreneurial spirit, right? It's like I got an extra room. What am I gonna do with it? I'm gonna start a business.
Yeah, and turn your spare room in the house into your office.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So tell us your story. I mean, you're an immigrant to this country and you've built a business and you worked through a lot of challenges over the years. I think folks would really get a lot of value out of you telling how you came here and everything and what you did when you got here.
Well, I'll make it very short. I was born in China, but I was born at a time when the communists were taking over all of China. I was born in what used to be called Canton, or now Guangzhou, the largest city in southern China. And within a month after I was born, my parents fled to Hong Kong. So my mother, took me to Hong Kong when I was still a baby. And so I spent my first 21 years in Hong Kong. I went to the University of Hong Kong. I studied geography. And even when I was a teenager, studying geography at, I'll call it Hong Kong U, Hong Kong University, I
Hmm.
was interested in China as a personality. That was my take. I wanted to study a culture as if that culture were a person. So
Hmm.
in 1971, I went to Chicago to pursue my master's degree at the University of Chicago in geography, specializing in Chinese cultural and world regional geography. And after that, I went to Michigan, Ann Arbor. I got my PhD in 1997. I put in 2 years as a college professor, and then I realized, much as I thought I wanted to be a scholar when I was a teenager, I decided no. I really I no. I saw real scholars, and I also came to the realization that I like people much more than I like books. I can I can talk to a room of people, but if you want me to sit still reading a book after a book, that's not my thing.
Hmm.
So I switched from teaching geography at Boston University and SUNY, the State University of New York.
Hmm.
I went to New York City and I got a job with a Fortune 500 publishing company, Harcourt, and I worked for a wholly owned subsidiary called Academic Press.
Hmm.
This is, Manhattan. And about 2 years later, I decided to set up my consulting practice to advise American companies, particularly manufacturers, to help them uh, export American made, 100% American made, manufactured, precision engineered machine products and other stuff to China. And that was 1983. So the rest is history. I'm still working on it. This is my 40th year as a consultant
Hmm.
of my own practice. I'm very thankful that I've been able. I've made it. I enjoy what I do. So why don't you ask me more specific kind of anecdotes, and I'll fill in the holes for
Yeah,
you.
no, absolutely. I mean, first of all, that realization of liking people more than books, I love that because it paints a really vivid picture, right? And
And
I don't
not
think
only
people make the
that,
time to do that.
yeah, and not only that, Drew, I noticed that really that I noticed at that time during that aha moment that I really was socially, culturally quite ignorant. You see, it's one thing being getting all your PhDs and all the degrees, but I somehow felt no, what I really wanted was more information and knowledge and personal experience about living in America,
Mm.
understanding the litigious nature of the American society, how you behave and what you say to people. That to me was more important than reading one book after another.
Yeah. And then that kind of self-awareness, that's I think, to your point, it's looking inward versus outward, right? You're looking at books and knowledge, and then that's great, right? There's nothing wrong with that. But at the same time, there's a level of self-awareness that needs to be had in order to know that, hey, you know what, I want to start a business, or I don't want to start a business, or I want to work for somebody else. When did that realization that I want to start this business come to you?
Yes, um, I was riding the double R subway train
Hmm.
from Queens to Manhattan one day in a crowded moving train. And I was reading an article by a journalist on consulting as a viable way to make a living. And the article spoke to me. And around that time, my company, uh, at that time, the Fortune 500 company, my their wholly owned subsidiary, Academic Press Inc., um, wanted to get rid of 75% of its employees. Why? Because the big boss, Mr. Yovanovitch of Harcourt Brace Yovanovitch,
Hmm.
wanted to relocate Academic Press from Manhattan to Orlando, Florida.
Hmm.
Why? Because he owns SeaWorld. So he had land. So he wanted to consolidate. I happen to be one of the 25% employees retained.
Wow.
And so I got a 1 week, all expenses paid vacation to decide in Orlando whether or not I would follow my company. And on the last day, I decided no, I couldn't do this for all kinds of reasons. I would rather not follow, I would rather not be a good soldier. I would rather be having my own thing, doing my own thing. And even if what I am is really a one person consulting practice. And it's also so happened around that time, I walk across the street, Fifth Avenue, from my company's building. There was a bookstore across the street, and I
Hmm.
found a book titled How to Be a Successful Independent Consultant. I read that book, and that's how my business began. I learned how to write a proposal. I learned how to price myself. Again, the rest is history. It's kind of serendipitous, Drew.
Yeah. No, and that's something that I think, I highlight a lot in different people I talk to. Everyone has that kind of, not everyone can pinpoint the moment, but that serendipitous combination of reading that article and then finding that book, and then the changes in the company, and then that adjustment that kind of wake you up and say, well, wait, here's the change coming. Do I want to be roll with that change, or do I want to make my own change? Right.
Yes, it was a gutsy moment, Drew. Very gutsy. But of course, I felt a great deal of apprehension,
Hmm.
but I was also very excited.
Yeah.
So it kind of worked out over the years. It has worked out.
Well, there's a thin line between excitement and anxiety, right?
Yes. Well, they're two sides of the coin.
Exactly.
Don't beat them. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Don't beat on them. No. Yeah.
So as an entrepreneur in the 80s, especially as a Chinese American, or a Chinese entrepreneur at the time, and an American
Sure.
eventually, you had a couple of stories you told me that I think are fabulous stories, and worth hearing to the audience. One of them was your fight with the immigration system. Do you want to?
Yes. It took me 5 years, three different lawyers, immigration lawyers, and the equivalent of $60,000, which I did not have in legal fees alone. And I had to attend three separate deportation hearings to explain why I did not want to leave. So, in the end, to make a very long and painful story very short, I had to prove that I was the only person in America who could do a job that no one else, no US citizen could do. Um, and I succeeded. And I had to advertise the company that sponsored me,
Mhm.
Academic Press, had to prove that I was really the only person. And oh, and of course, I missed the most important thing. You see, Drew, it's very important for people like me who are immigrants to understand that America is not as easy as it looks
Mm.
on the surface. That there is a lot of American culture, particularly the law, the legal structure. If you don't understand, if you are clueless, you have only yourself to blame. So my big, almost fatal mistake was I did not change my status from student visa to like a work visa
Mm.
or an immigrant visa uh, when my student visa was about to expire. So the moment I needed a job, the moment after my getting a PhD degree, the moment I showed up at Boston University, there were only several days left in my student visa, in my passport. And by the time I told immigration that I wanted to be an immigrant, they said, oh no, you have already overstayed
Oh,
your
wow.
visa. By overstaying, automatically and by definition, I became an illegal immigrant. That's why. And it's
Mm.
very difficult. I don't recommend people going through what I did because to me, it finally ended up not just the money, not just the inability to work for 3 to 4 years, no income,
Mm.
that I finally broke down. I happened to be next to a cathedral in Center City, Philadelphia, in downtown Philadelphia, and I said to God in the cathedral that, well, I have no choice but to ask you that if you can help me get a green card, I would help pull China and America closer. So that moment was also the moment when I came up with the idea of what I wanted to do for my life and
Mm.
how I wanted, what kind of a business I wanted to be in. See, by putting America closer, there was a reason. Because even when I was growing up, I knew that the two cultures, the American culture, the Chinese culture, are just totally incompatible. Let's face it, do not fool yourself. They are
Mm.
not compatible and they will never be compatible. But that's okay. That's okay. That's why there are people like me who are culture brokers. You
Mhm.
have to become a culture broker. It's a legitimate, a fun, and exciting business to be in because I knew that no matter what, the using a Hong Kong Chinese Cantonese expression, the Americans and the Chinese are talking like ducks and chickens. They don't have a common language.
Yep. Yeah. No, and that's, you said a couple things that I wanna highlight. Right. One is the the challenge of being an immigrant in this country and not understanding the laws. Right. I think that of all the countries I've ever seen and visited,
Big
right,
time.
the U.S. makes it the easiest to learn and the hardest. I would say it's both. Right. It's two sides of the same coin. Right.
Right,
They translate everything into different languages so that everyone can
right,
read it, but they also make it really confusing with the different levels of stuff. Right. Because I have friends who went through the immigration process. I have friends who are immigration attorneys, and some of them are just like they just make it really really overly complex, right? But especially in the 80s, though, in the 80s, I mean, my parents dealt with all kinds of racism and all kinds of discrimination based on just literally the color of their skin and the way they looked, right? I know you and I have talked about that briefly, in terms of what you went through, and overcoming that to still become a business owner and to still beat the immigration system, right, at their own game and stay here and then continue to move on and build your own business. That's just amazing. And how did you, I mean, what did you encounter on your side of it? What are some examples of racism that you overcame in this country?
okay, two sides to this racism coin. The bad side is yes, racism exists and it's not never going to go away.
Mhm.
Uh, However, in my experiences, the racism I ran into wasn't the naked, stark naked, hostile kind of screaming at you and spitting on you. Not that terrible. It's really subtle. Like
Mhm.
people shake hands with other people, but they don't shake hands with you.
Yeah.
People hug other people, they don't hug you. People kiss other people, they don't kiss you. And when they entertain people, you sit with the kids. You don't sit at the adults' table.
uh,
And when you go to a party, people talk to other people, but they don't talk to you. You almost become invisible. So you get the drift. It's the subtlety that hits you. And if you are sensitive enough to know it, uh, that's okay. You know why? Because I think immigrant has an instinct that is valuable. An immigrant is somebody who is willing to leave her or his own culture. And therefore, these people are never going to feel entitled. In other words, we are very lucky. We feel lucky. We are able to get in and we are able to succeed, even though in the beginning, it's a lot of hard work and it's a lot of really kissing the frogs before you run into the prince or the princess. So,
Yeah.
so that's the so-called the not too pleasant side of the coin called racism. But then the flip side is there are people who like us. There are people who are not racist. They exist. They really exist. And all my clients, I have more than 100. All my clients are practically lily white, Caucasian. I mean, if they really hated me, they wouldn't pay me.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a client who has retained me for 40 years now, and it's still ongoing. And they listen to me, they respect me, they pay me handsomely. So I just want to tell people, no, 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 don't look at racism as a totally bad thing. There is a flip side that's a good thing. It's beneficial.
Yeah, I mean, it can definitely work in our favor, especially given certain circumstances. But I think I want to go back to what you said earlier too, though, about that idea of being being the invisible and then but still persisting right past that and working past that, and that entitlement concept. I have a, I don't want to say a theory. I have a hypothesis that resilience is the opposite of entitlement, right?
Yeah.
And I think immigrants are the epitome of resilience because, like you said, I mean, and even especially in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, even there was no internet back then, right? There was no there's no way to talk to your family back home in real time unless you're spending a fortune on phone calls or writing letters that would get there like a week or two or three, sometimes even a month and a half later, right? And so, how did you did you keep in touch with your family when you were here? How did
Of
you do
course.
that?
Well, on a weekly basis, I didn't use the telephone because the telephone rates were outrageously expensive. But there are post office issued blue color letters. You probably will not see them now. That you can write, and then and the postage was constant at that moment. So I would be writing once a week or once in 2 weeks to my parents. That's one way of communicating. Very snail mail, very slow, but that was the way it was. So I really didn't. Again, I want to kind of close this story about racism by telling people actually racism in a disguised manner, sometimes not that disguised a manner, kind of feeds the fire in our belly. You don't look at it, you don't look at yourself as the victim. We are not victimized. Actually, we are energized by certain people who decide that they will not like us. That's okay, because there are other people who like us, somehow are fascinated by us. That's really what I want to say.
Yeah, I love that. I love that concept so much. And I think more people need to hear that. I think more people need to adopt that. It's not, in spite of them, you'll still do what you want to need to do.
Yeah. Don't fight with them. Don't get angry. Don't get hostile. Don't. There's no point. Really, there's no point. There's no point. Yeah, it's only natural that some people are racist against you. It happens everywhere, all cultures.
Yeah, and I think to a point, right? I think that there's a point where you do have to fight back, but only in very certain situations, right? Most people, the average person, they don't matter, right? But if it's a position of power, if someone who controls your destiny, so to speak, you kind of have to, right? You have to assert yourself. But I think knowing the difference, right? Not taking on everybody all the time. I think that's the key.
In short, choose your battle.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. I love that. So these days, you said, so culture consulting, culture broker. these roles are really fascinating. I mean, what does that look like? What does it mean to be a culture broker between the US and China?
Thank you. I think that the single most important intangible criterion of a culture broker is somebody who respects and deeply admires, in fact, loves both cultures.
Mm,
So, because of that, and plus, you have to put in enough time dealing with people in the two cultures so that you will find a language. Once you hear something from culture A, which is incompatible with culture B, you will have to be an internal translator, interpreter. Once you listen to the spiel or the complaint in culture A, you will have to reform it and then make that spiel or complaint more easily digestible, more palatable, because your role is not to make the chicken and the duck fight more.
yeah.
Your goal is to make them try not to fight and find ways to make both sides understand that sometimes the conflicts are real. So it's human to have those conflicts, and then help them find a way to compromise.
Mm,
So it's never a one side must win, the other side must lose. It never is the key. So in short, I think it's a culture broker requires a bicultural sensibility. That means you don't despise them both. You don't you don't let both of them feel that either one exists. If one exists, the other must die. You don't do
mm,
that. You don't do that. Then you won't be a culture broker.
yeah. Yeah. It reminds me of, Simon Sinek, the author, has a book called The Infinite Game, right? And you have this idea of this finite game where it's a you have to be a win lose, right? And then you have lose lose. But then what you're talking about is creating that win win situation where both sides understand that they both have something to gain. It may be something different on each side, right? It doesn't have to be the same thing. What you're talking about is negotiation, like literally two sides negotiating to a common goal, common win, really, right? Where they can both win, and where each side is giving up something, but it's not something that loses. You don't really lose anything, right? You're compromising.
It is easier said than done, Drew. You know that.
Yeah. Oh
Easier
yeah.
said than done. It's like how to act, how to be a good actor, how to be a good artist. It's easy for you. Being the world's most famous singer or
Mhm.
actor, you can say, oh, it's quite easy. No, it's not easy. Millions of people try and fail.
Yeah.
So you have to like what you do. In short, you have to like the role.
But I appreciate what you said too about you have to love both cultures, right? You have
Yeah,
to really, really appreciate and love both cultures. If you love only one side, you're going to be leaning towards that side, right?
absolutely. And people can see it.
People
They
can see,
both can
yes,
see it. So
exactly,
the two of them will attack you actually. Once they see it and once they sense it, they attack you. You're done. You're no longer a consultant. You're no longer the negotiator. Forget
right?
it.
Yeah, you have to remain impartial. Otherwise, you're not going to, you can't be respected by either side.
There is one more story that it's on my LinkedIn site right now that I do want to tell Drew if I
Yeah,
have
please.
a few more minutes, which is
Yeah,
about midlife crisis.
please.
It's real. I don't want people to go into a midlife crisis. And if you do, find a way to get back out.
Hmm.
Some 7 or 8 years into my consulting practice, uh, in Beijing, the students were protesting against the Beijing government, the Tiananmen incident, and the
Hmm.
people shooting, the army shooting, the guy in the tank.
Yep.
Um, and so when that happened, U.S.-China trade took a deep dive. Nobody wanted to go. I didn't want to go to China. It was unsafe. And then I got into a mind game, a self-imposed mind
Mm.
game that, oh, gee, I don't know when the whole situation could change. And because of this, nobody wanted to go to China. How could I get clients? How could I run my business? So I told myself that my China practice would therefore die. And and I was 39 years old, the ripe age for midlife crisis. And so I and the midlife crisis made me feel, oh, I had fun for 7 or 8 years being my own boss, which was what I love to do, because I'm not a good soldier unless I had a wonderful boss. But few bosses are ever wonderful, even oneself.
Yeah.
And so I said to myself, oh, I have no choice but to find a job. I must go back to the 9 to 5 world of work. And what followed was I immediately told myself I love to go to work in the morning because somehow I felt, again, it's wrongful perception. I had the erroneous perception that I knew I was unwilling to be an employee because I thought that I lost my freedom to be a free spirit, to run
Yeah.
my own thing. So I thought of myself as a gigolo. Yes, even though I did my job well
Yeah.
and I liked what I did, I felt I was a hired, unwilling worker. I despised myself. I felt that I had no passion anymore. I only had my body. I wasn't really excited about what I did, even though I was good at it.
Yeah.
I was still helping companies dealing with China and Asia. One day, uh, and nobody could talk me to think otherwise. One day, as I was washing dishes over the kitchen sink, I saw my reflection on the steel spigot of the sink. And suddenly, when there was light in the adjoining living room. And somehow I said to myself, as I was looking at my reflection on the spigot, I can see myself now. I no longer want to wallow in self pity. I can't deal with all the angst, the feeling of being a failure, the anxiety, the depression. I won't have it. And suddenly I said to myself, I'm cured. The virus left me. I no longer want to wallow in self pity. Plus,
Yeah.
it was an erroneous perception on my part. There was nothing wrong holding down a job. Holding down a job should not mean that you are a prostitute or a gigolo. As long as you know one day you have to get out of it and become who you are. So at that very moment, I really woke up. So I restarted the one wise thing I did when I was working as an employee for 2 years, I told two of my clients that I could not help them during the day, that they could not call me at work, but I would be willing to spend my evening time, my weekend time helping them. And of course, I couldn't go to China. They didn't want to go to China. They said yes. So even though my consulting practice was on life support, it did not die. It was only
Yeah.
on life support. And
Yeah.
so right after that moment in the kitchen, it was like a revelation. It was like an annunciation moment. I got back. I'm okay. I'm alive. And that's 1991, late 1991. End of
Yeah.
my midlife crisis story.
I think that's I think that's really incredible and important to highlight too, because what you said is important about no one else could talk you out of that, right? Because when you're in that mindset, it's all mindset, all of it. It's all how you're perceiving the world, how you're perceiving yourself, and the story you're telling yourself about everything, right?
And it's
That story.
incredibly irrational, Dhru.
Yes. Oh yeah.
Incredibly irrational.
There's nothing logical about any of that stuff, right? Our stories are not logical. I think that's what people don't get is they don't get that this stuff is not logical. It's how we feel and how we perceive, and that's completely separate from logic,
No.
right? It's separate from rational thought. And I have a theory right now that our society is built to create midlife crises, right? People, because
Possible.
because think about it, from in this country at least. I'm not sure about other countries because I haven't grown up there, but I've observed the way this country is built. The elementary school, the entire school system up until through high school is teaching people how to be followers. How do you follow? How do you follow? How to follow all the rules. If you think about anything independent, if you think you have to, nothing is encouraged to think independently. It's always like, even in English class, it's like, oh, what did this author mean? Here's, giving you the topic sentence. You don't tell us what you think. This is what you should think about this book.
Right. Yeah.
And then
just
you write
get
this.
An A. Just get
yeah,
an A.
Just get an A.
A.
Right. You're looking for external validation consistently the entire time, right?
Right.
Then you go to college and they're like, decide the rest of your life. Now we've given you all these tools that don't help you at all to do anything with your life, but decide the rest of your life. And you're like, okay, I guess I'm going to pick this. You just like dartboard, throw something against the wall and see what sticks.
Right.
And then you decide what you want to do. You go into that career and maybe you love it, maybe you hate it, but you've invested $200,000 or more
or more
in this career, right? Mm-hmm. And now you're like, I got to pay off my debt. I got to figure this out. And you get caught in this rat race. And now if you are good enough at what you do to get promoted to manager or some kind of leadership position, well, now you have no idea how to lead people because you've followed your entire life, right? And now they're asking you to lead people. And then if you don't know how to do it, there's no real training that most companies give you. And so you get stuck. So then you end up in a situation like yours where you're like, okay, well, what do I do with what I want to do? I don't know what I want to do. And this thing I want to do over here, it doesn't seem possible anymore. And now I'm doing this thing that I don't want to do. And now I feel like I'm renting out my body or renting out my mind or whatever.
I was being truthful. I have totally, I have no, I don't need to feel shy. In fact, because I'm grateful. I'm grateful. I can talk about it and I'm happy I got out of it. And so really, it's in the end, I think we want to be independent. We want to do what we respect ourselves to do. I think to me, this is very important.
Mm-hmm. And the word you said earlier was freedom, which I really align with that word, the freedom that it gives you to own your own schedule, to make your own to make your own decisions about work, about whatever. That's what we entrepreneurs are always seeking, right? It's like freedom. How do we make ourselves more free to do more of what we want to do in the world? And that's just amazing that you're able to do that and pull yourself out of that, because a lot of people don't pull themselves out of it. A lot of people go down the path of just self-wallowing and then spiraling even into a down depression. And it affects them, it affects their lives, it affects their families,
Very dangerous. Very dangerous. Yeah. So don't go in. Don't go, and find a way to get out. Find a way to get out. I think we can get out. We can.
Yeah.
We can, and I have.
Yeah, you're proof that you can do it, right?
It can be done. But my immigration, the way I got to be a legal immigrant, not recommended. Truly not because even if you would like to talk to God, he may not always
listen.
Yeah. So
well, especially nowadays. It's much harder now than it was back then. Nowadays, in terms of getting citizenship and whatnot, it's become a whole nother rigmarole. But so we're getting up on time, and I wanted to ask you 2 questions left. One is about your book, The Spare Room Tycoon. Tell us what made you want to write it, and where can folks find it?
One of my 2 best clients, a year before the book idea came to my head, just made me feel that I had to justify every single hour of my work. And I didn't feel good. And I was so unhappy. My partner, who is a successful American writer, journalist and writer, said, James, don't be angry at your client. Write a book. List all your interview a lot of people, find out what they have in common in terms of their problems in running a small business or being independent entrepreneurs. Write a book. I can help you because I have a good agent. So I have an advantage. He has a good agent. So I wrote the book, and the book, I interviewed more than 40 people, but I put the stories of 40 people, including myself, into the book. It's called 70 Lessons of Sane, SANE, sane self-employment. And so I think it's like how to price, how to market yourself, how to take rejection, how to really develop a pricing strategy that works with certain clients. It's something that I learned over the years to acquire these skills. They did not come easy. And so that's why I call it spare room tycoon. Tycoon meaning I do my own thing. Nobody tells me, nobody breathes down my neck. And I do my own thing, but I work out of a spare room and I have my autonomy. The tycoon meaning autonomy. I don't compete and compare with my clients. I advise them, I serve them, but I'm not the kept person.
Yeah. Yeah. That sounds like a really fast. I mean, it sounds like it's essential reading for any entrepreneur who's starting out, because all those things, I mean, as a business coach, all those things I work with people on, there's so many people that have that problem, especially on pricing and selling and how do you actually do that? Like, that's huge because it's a value question, right? It's always a question of value.
Dhru, it took me between 10 and 15 years to finally find out how to price myself with certain clients so that my business can last 10 to 15 years of practice, day to day, minute to minute practice.
Yeah.
Not easy.
No, it takes, but that other part of it too is the discipline and consistent practice of how do you keep doing that? Because some people, especially
I love
nowadays,
what I do, Dhru. I really love what I do. I am totally shameless. I can tell God that this is what I love to do. I am being truthful.
Yeah.
That's why I can last.
And I think a lot of people don't even know what they want to do these days. They'll follow the next shiny object, right? And if you take the time to understand what you want to do, though, some people do, obviously, right? But I think that the problem is that we get this shiny object syndrome, especially with the internet and all these different posts and things like that. Where it's like, oh, you can do this, you can do that, you can do this. You want to make extra 200,000 a month? Do this, and it's distracting. It's all distraction, right?
But the luck is, Dhru, these people should not forget adversity is a good teacher. When they get hit hard on their head and they suffer, they finally know. They then know what they really love to do. They have to run into adversity. There's nothing wrong with encountering adversity.
And I think that's the difference in the mindset, is that nowadays people look at adversity as a completely bad thing. Yes,
I don't want it. Yeah, I don't want it. I only need to be entertained. Other than that, go away. I want no pain.
Right. No. And there may be negative effects of pain, sure, absolutely. But there's also positive. There's growth from pain. There's growth from adversity. I think that's the part people miss and forget, is that there's growth and resilience from that, and that develops. Well, James, the last question I have for you, and it's something I ask everybody, is in your journey as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, as who you are, who was the biggest influence on you, or what was the biggest influence on you as you were going through your journey? Whether it's a person, a book, a movie, TV show, anything, or any of that.
Wow. There are quite a few people. My partner, my PhD dissertation advisor, these are key figures. But it's still adversity. It's the church. It's praying to God. Even though I'm not Christian, somebody got transactional and said, oh, you pray to God. God gave you a green card. So why aren't you a Christian or Catholic? It's like transactional. They just missed the point that I was having a conversation, surely with God, but also with myself. Come on. I'm not going to lie to myself. I cannot lie to myself.
Yeah.
I have to be totally honest. So to answer your question in a direct, tangible, logical way, is looking into myself in the moment of adversity. What is it that I want to live for? Something I feel that life has a meaning. And once I get that meaning, I get my career, I get my business, I'm doing well. I can't, there's no happiness better than this.
Hmm.
None, zero. You can't pay me $1 trillion to be hired to run Google or whatever. No, no, I don't want the 10 trillion. I don't want the gold of Solomon. No, I don't. I rather have myself. No, money can't buy me the meeting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm.
I appreciate that. That's really learned wisdom. I think a lot of people, again, a lot of people won't be able to understand that until you go through that level of adversity and understand who you are on your journey.
But also in the middle of suffering, deep suffering,
Mm.
of hopelessness, of near despair,
Yeah.
I found myself in near despair. But it was good. At least I found myself.
It's part of the journey, right? And that
Yes.
journey, I think of the hero's journey and how the hero has to fall eventually to
Yeah.
really get back up and build the version of the hero that you see at the end,
Yeah,
right?
you have to slay the dragon yourself. Nobody, yeah, other people can help you. They will, and they will, and they will.
Yeah,
There are good kindred spirits who will help you, but you have to do it yourself.
I love that, man. Well, I don't think there's any better place to end this than there. Thank you so much, James. I really appreciate it. Everyone, if you want to reach out to James, his information will be in the description below and in the show notes. Thank you so much again for taking the time. This was an awesome interview, and I think people got a lot out of it. So thank you so much, James.
Thank you, Dhru, for again giving me the opportunity to tell my stories. Thank
My
you.
pleasure. Thanks
Bye
a lot.
bye.
Take care, everybody.